The second stage of Dante's LRE is about to come to an end, and I thought I'd just have a little blab about some problems I can foresee for LREs if they continue to be as they currently are. Now you'll see here my attempt to, well, I wasn't really attempting to unlock Dante at Mythic. I was under no illusions about being able to do that. I didn't think I was going to be able to at all, and I've got nowhere close. To be fair, part of that was me just messing around and trying out battles I probably really had no business attempting to do, especially getting grand scores of 3 kills before my entire teams were wiped out. So yeah, I flew a bit close to the sun as usual and wasted a few tokens, but I wasn't really concerned because I knew I wasn't going to be unlocking at Mythic anyway. But that's all by the by. Now what I want to talk about is a new perspective that I've gained on LREs now that we've faced these Mythic tier battles for the first time. Now I will continue to champion the idea of building a tool roster, especially if you want to unlock a character at Blue Star. I think that is the way to go. The reason for building a tool roster is that you want to clear through the highest battles possible, because you get a lot of points just through clearing out all the enemies, getting a high score, and beating the defeat all enemies requirements. So even if you don't meet a lot of other requirements whilst doing so, it will still tend to outstrip the number of points you can get per token if you're just sort of piddling around in the lower levels and trying to, beat these sort of more niche requirements. I mean, Full Cycle isn't that niche, but I'm talking about things like the infiltrate requirement in Trajan's event or what have you, picking up those little points. Now, however, with the Mythic tier of battles, things they're starting to get a little more interesting, because even with the most heavily built teams possible, I was really struggling with some of these, especially in the Gamma Track. Battle 16 was particularly nasty, and I think that's getting points out of these higher tier battles, the 16s, 17s and 18s, will really become, will be like squeezing blood out of stone really, to the point where actually now things have swung back towards you're actually probably going to get more of a reward out of trying to clear out more niche requirements in lower tier battles, just simply due to the fact that they're possible to beat, whereas these high tier ones really I don't think are going to be possible to beat unless you have seriously overgeared teams to tackle them with. However, I say overgeared, let's just take a look at Battle 16 here. So you can't really be overgeared for this battle, because all of the enemies are already pretty much, aside from these intercessors, they're already at Adamantine 3. So basically they're as tough as they could possibly be. So, I mean, this is already kind of a problem, I think, because this is only Battle 16, and yet we're already basically capped out on the difficulty of the enemies available to face. Like, these mortars, these Adamantine 3 mortars, they were killing my D3 characters in, basically one shot. So what difference is it going to make if we face 7 of these in this battle, and then maybe, I don't know, facing 9 or 10 or 12 or whatever in a later battle? Regardless of how many there are, they're still going to be killing my characters in one shot regardless. So, what difference does it really actually make? This seems like a really strange way of organising this event where you're already basically capped out on the difficulty at Battle 16. I was expecting there to be a lot sort of slower gradient of a build-up of the difficulty of the battles, but this almost seems like a deliberate way of just completely gating you out of progress, unless you have an extremely built team, which obviously at this point isn't even possible, because the maximum rank you can get your characters to is Adamantine 1. And you also have to consider this in contrast to how things were previously, when the maximum rarity was legendary. So let's just compare and contrast Alpha 14 and Alpha 18. So in Alpha 18 here, you've got these Ophidian Destroyers, the toughest ones that you could have faced back when the rarity cap, the maximum, was legendary. So the maximum difficulty Ophidians you could face are Gold 2. Now, if you compare Gold 2 enemies to Diamond 3 enemies, Diamond 3 enemies have about 2.5 times the stats of a Gold 2 enemy. So if your characters are at Diamond 3, which is the maximum possible rank they could be at back when we didn't have Mythic rarity, your characters essentially have 2.5 times the stats of these Ophidian destroyers. Now, if we look at Battle 18, you have these Ophidian destroyers who are at Diamond 3. So, even if you get your characters to Adamantine 3 once that rank eventually becomes available, whenever that happens, Adamantine 3, I think, if I remember Nandy's video on this correctly, because the scaling of the stats flattens quite significantly after you reach Diamond 3. The stats of Adamantine 3 characters compared to Diamond 3 characters, they're only about 1.5 times higher. So actually, these battles, the ranks of the enemies comparative to your characters are actually a lot tougher than they were previously in the highest tier of battles. So, if you're facing Gold 2 enemies in Battle 14 and you've got Diamond 3s, that's going to be a hell of a lot easier fight than facing Diamond 3 enemies with Adamantine 3 enemies in Battle 18. And this is a real problem because it's already difficult enough to get characters to Mythic rarity, and now you're expected to actually face tougher fights once you get there as well. So how are you really expected to claw together all of the points to get to Mythic rarity in the LRE unless you just have an absolutely insane roster? Now, how many points do you need to get the Ascension to Mythic in an LRE? Well, it's 22,000 if you manage it during the 3rd event. So that means you can drop a total of 5,000 points across the entire event from the maximum available. I've already seen how difficult it is to claw any points out of these sort of battles 15, 16, 17 and 18, but 16, 17 and 18 in particular have been pretty nasty. So that doesn't actually leave you a lot of leeway to get characters ascended to Mythic via LREs at all. And, Snowprint said that they were hoping that it would be as easy to get characters to Adamantine 3 with the economy changes that have recently occurred as it was to get them to Diamond 3 from Stone 1 before we had the recent economy changes. And I'm really just not seeing that at all. They made it easier to farm more shards over a period of time via campaign nodes, but there are a lot of characters where you can't even farm them via campaigns anyway. It's not like we're able to get more shards via onslaughts. You still have the same regeneration rate on onslaught tokens, and they still give the same paltry few shards that they gave before the update. So yeah, I'm really just not seeing it. I don't think it's going to be very easy at all to catch up with these requirements so that it's actually possible to well, it will be possible to ascend characters for free, but it will be very, very difficult in comparison to the previous kind of final goalpost, which was getting characters to Blue Star when we only had to face Battle 14. So that's just a problem that I'm seeing here. The economy, it really hasn't been changed enough to accommodate these changes in LREs, unless of course they do want Mythic rarity Ascensions to be much harder to reach than Blue Star Ascensions, Blue Star promotions were before. So if that's the case, if they just want to make it basically impossible, then sure, go ahead, but I don't know, it just seems a bit I'm not going to say scummy, but it certainly is done in a way that would encourage people to spend money on these events. Don't want to make insinuations, but that's just the way it is right now. So could be changes in the future that are incoming, and I think we will need to demand those changes if they don't come about via Snowprint's actions. I don't think we can just sort of sit idly by and take these changes to the economy when really I don't think they've been particularly beneficial to the player base. One thing that's especially galling is the cost of buying legendary orbs now. It just seems quite ridiculous, considering that they're no longer able to be acquired randomly via guild raids. I think they need an adjustment on their price, really, for it to make much sense. For us to be expected to get as many characters to Mythic as we need to be able to compete in these events, and do as well as we were accustomed to before, as free-to-play players at least. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. And again, that's just coming back around to the whole thing I was saying of you really can't afford to drop many points, and obviously in the lower tier battles now, that makes them a lot more attractive to try and tackle the more niche requirements in those, which means upgrading niche characters, which is another imposition really. And some of these tracks, I don't think it's even possible to get anywhere near beating Battle 14 anyway. There's stuff like in Trajan's event, the Infiltrate track, the characters that are available for that track are just so bad. I don't think it's possible to get anywhere close to completing that requirement in as many battles as you'd need to comfortably get a Mythic Ascension. So again, this just seems to be another thing that is forcing people towards paying for packs or so close offers where you're, shelling out thousands upon thousands of Blackstone to get that Ascension. Obviously, you can just wait until the LRE is over and then do the Mythic mission chain, but that puts you at an advantage for quite a few months, so I can understand why people would want to skip to the front of the queue and just take those paid offers to get characters ascended to Mythic as early as they can. At this point, it just seems like unlocking a character at Mythic would be such a Herculean task that something needs to be changed here. Either these ridiculous requirements such as Infiltrate need to just be changed to something else that's just not stupid and not impossible, and not something that will basically, just by virtue of its existence, block you from being able to ascend a character to Mythic without paying, or the difficulty of these later battles really needs to be reevaluated, because at the moment they just seem to be way too high, again, for anyone to ever actually have much of a hope of ascending any character to Mythic, unless you're in the 0.00001% of players as a free-to-play player, So anyway, those are just my kind of ranty thoughts on this, and I'm not upset about this in any way, but again, I wasn't expecting to unlock him at Mythic, and I might have a chance of doing it in the third event, but I'd really rather not have to think in the future about upgrading absolute trash characters to really high levels just to have a chance of making the Mythic Ascension without having to, finish the LRE first. It would be nice as well if you could just ascend them via their Mythic mission chains without having to complete the LRE, although I can understand why you wouldn't be able to do that. But whatever's going on here, it just doesn't quite seem to be right to me, and I think some adjustments need to be made. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that before I ramble any further. So I thought I was done with my rant, but a thought came to me that was just kind of so obvious. I almost dumbfounded myself with how I hadn't really considered it before, but ascending a character to Mythic for a free-to-play player, as things currently stand, is basically completely pointless. And what I mean by this is the fact that, as things stand again, in the second event, I think it's basically going to be impossible for a free-to-play player to ascend any character to Mythic. Just the paucity of tokens available combined with the lack of points that you get, I'm just not seeing it happening. So what does that mean then? Free-to-play players are going to be, if they do manage to ascend a character to Mythic during the LRE, they'll be doing it in the third event. But of course, once the third leg of the event ends, you just get the chance to ascend a character to Mythic via their Mythic quest chain anyway, which probably won't be too difficult for you to do if you're able to almost ascend a character to Mythic during an LRE in the first place. if you catch my drift. You know, a lot of these missions, they rely on a strong roster, but if you're able to do that, you clearly have a strong roster. So why actually put in all of the extra effort into building characters, many of which will be pretty niche and you might not have wanted to have upgraded, to get those extra points to ascend a character during the LRE when you could just wallow at 18,000 points or however many it is to get a character to blue star, and then just simply pick up the quest chain at the end of things. There are so many upgrades that you'd have to do. There's so much extra work that you'd have to put in, when the ultimate difference in results will be maybe you'll ascend, if you do manage to ascend via the LRE, okay, maybe you'll get the character ascended to Mythic 5 days earlier than someone who's just sitting at 18,000 points. And, oh, you know, you'll be able to save on spending 10 Mythic orbs and getting, 20 shards for the character. I think I'll take buying 10 orbs and grinding out 20 shards any day over the sheer amount of effort it would require to get a character ascended to Mythic during an LRE. Like, it just doesn't make any sense at all, if you think about it. It just boggles the mind, really. I think a situation has been created here where people are just going to be utterly disincentivized from trying in LREs at all, especially upgrading characters specifically for LREs, past the point of just getting a character to blue star. So yeah, it's just going to be a dichotomy between either paying in the second event and getting the character ascended then, or you just sit there and basically do nothing and just take the easy ascension once the event is over. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense at all why you'd go to such a huge effort for such measly gains over someone who doesn't really put in any effort at all. So yeah, I think I've repeated myself about 3 times there, but hopefully it makes sense. And yeah, it's just crazy, really. It makes no sense.